everyone, this is Addicron Podfic, back with another podfic. Today I will be reading Sunset by Nick Nelson is an Aries kid, sorry. Okay. Um, so first, this one is sad. It's very sad. Um, I'm pretty sure this is the first fic, to ever have actually brought me to tears. So there's that warning. Also, the timeline doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but it's fine. Riordan's timeline is kind of a freaking mess anyway. So let's get right into it with the summary. Nico and Will had been dating for about 5 years, and Nico planned to propose to Will soon. They still lived at camp because Will liked saving people and Nico didn't legally exist. Nico walked through the infirmary where he saw his boyfriend tending to a Hecate kid who had been injured by some Aries kid with a vengeance. Wow, Aries kids being ultra-violent. What a surprise. Nico walked into the infirmary to help his boyfriend out. As Nico walked in through the infirmary doors, he waved at Kayla and Austin. Everything was pretty nice. Nico and Will had been dating for about 5 years, and Nico planned to propose to Will soon. They still lived at camp because Will liked saving people and Nico didn't legally exist. Nico walked through the infirmary where he saw his boyfriend tending to a Hecate kid who had been injured by some Aries kid with a vengeance. Wow, Aries kids being ultra-violent. What a surprise. Anyway, Nico loved the way the infirmary was. He used to hate the feeling of death, but over the past few years he'd grown to associate the infirmary with Will. And since he loved Will, he loved the infirmary. As he looked around, he remembered those 3 days in the infirmary when they first started talking, when he said Nico was a friendly face, the way that Will had stubbornly forced Nico to eat and drink water. Gods, he loved that man. The way his blonde hair fell on his face, those startling blue eyes that he got lost in. He took the harvest cheddar sun chips and placed them next to where Will was working. "Hey, Care Bear," Nico said, as Will didn't turn. He was clearly hard at work trying to save the Hecate kid. Nico could see the panic in Will's eyes as the Hecate kid began to convulse, Will doing anything he could to save him. Nico was trying to help him, but he could tell that Thanatos was already reaching out for the kid. This Hecate kid, Dan, was practically dead already. Nico's face was solemn as the Hecate kid stopped moving. Will stared down at the kid as the machine flatlined, trying to bring him back frantically. "No, no," he muttered, but Nico knew he was gone. He gently placed a hand on Will's shoulder, and Will realized that his patient was gone, and his shoulders shook slightly as he turned and cried into Nico's shoulder. Just then, one of the Hecate girls ran into the infirmary where she saw her half-brother and the flatline. A look of pure rage crossed her face. While you would have thought she'd blame the kid who got him killed, she turned to face Will. "You were supposed to save him!" she yelled at him, tears streaming down her face. Her voice broke. "It was your job!" Will turned to look at her and looked down. I did all I could. His voice shook, and Nico pulled him into him again. The Hecate girl let out a guttural scream of rage, anguish, and grief. Nico watched in horror as a blast of magic in an indescribable color hit Will square in the chest. He fell to the ground out of Nico's arms, blood oozing out of his chest. Nico didn't notice the guilt and realization on the Hecate girl's face, or the way everyone was staring, unsure what to do. He didn't notice the blood stain Will had left on that shirt he'd never wear again. All that mattered in the moment to Nico was his sunshine, his stupid, kind, sarcastic, stubborn, sweet boyfriend laying there on the floor, blood oozing out of his chest, barely breathing. It was clear to anyone who watched that Will wouldn't survive. Nico fell to his knees by Will's side, tears streaming down his cheeks. "No," he whispered, his voice shaking. This can't be. Don't die, please, hang on." Will smiled up weakly at Nico. "It's okay, my grumpy ball of darkness." His voice was weak, and the light was dulling in his eyes like a glow stick running out of battery. Nico took his hand gently. Nico started, then he realized that he was gonna lose him. His breathing was shallow and broken as he pulled out the ring. His hands shook violently. He had to do this. Whatever mask of calm that Will was putting on for Nico dropped. "Nico," he breathed shakily, a tear sliding down his face. William Andrew Solis, the light of my life," Nico said, on the verge of straight-up sobbing, tears running down his face. "Will you marry me? I love you, love you." His bottom lip quivered as he popped open a ring box, revealing a beautiful ring with a stone the color of Will's eyes. A tear ran down Will's cheek as the color slowly faded from his eyes, but with the last breath he managed to weak. "Yes, I love you too." Then he stilled, the light completely fading from his eyes, his breath stopping completely, and Nico broke, tears flowing out of his face onto Will's chest as he slid the ring onto Will's ring finger. He ran his thumb over Will's fingers, sobbing over Will's body, because that's all it was, a body. Nico barely even noticed how the blood had pooled under Nico, staining his sweatpants. Nico gave him one last kiss on the forehead, sobbing as he gently closed his eyes. He just sobbed over Will, not moving until Leo managed to drag him away, gently for once. At first, Nico fought it, but at the end of the day, it didn't matter. For his Will, the light of his life, his amazing boyfriend, no, his amazing fiancé, was dead. His eyes never left the body on the floor as he was dragged out of the infirmary. The tears had stopped, replaced by a numb pain because nothing mattered. His son was gone. Leo dragged Nico to cabin 13 and sat him on the bed. Nico could tell that Leo didn't know what to say. He didn't either. All he could feel was helplessness. He buried his face in his hands, and Leo hesitantly placed an arm around Nico's shoulders. Nico slid his own engagement ring on. He knew there was a low chance that he'd ever love like that again. The tears starting to fall again, and he let Leo hug him, sobbing. Leo just held him there, a single tear rolling down his face, though Nico didn't notice. Will was dead. He could tell that much. The feeling as he walked into the underworld was so different when he was dead. Honestly, the feeling was indescribable. He looked down at his left hand, where his ring was, and he could feel the tears slide down his face. Gods, he missed his boyfriend, his fiancée. As he got into line, he heard a familiar voice. Will? What are you doing here? Will turned around to be face to face with nobody other than the god of the underworld himself, Hades. Hades had a dangerous fire in his eyes. Died? Will said. What else was there to say? Hades sighed. Hold out your hand. Will, confused, obliged. Hades put a piece of paper from literally nowhere and placed it in Will's hand before closing Will's fist. Hades snapped his fingers. After a week, Nico was still in tatters. Leo would stop by and make him eat food, but Nico only ate because Will would have wanted him to. Leo didn't say much, didn't even crack a joke. Nico appreciated that. He never left his cabin, not once. Sometimes the whole ordeal would come crashing over him, and you could hear things being thrown. He placed his picture of Will next to his painting of Bianca that Rachel had helped make for him. Today he had made a mess of his cabin again. He heard a knock on the door. It was Leo, with a burger. Nico nodded in thanks, still not able to speak. Hey, Leo said. You want to help cleaning up? His voice was soft, gentle even. Nico looked around, then shook his head. Still not speaking, huh? Leo asked. Nico shook his head, a single tear running down his face. Leo nodded, placing something on the dresser, and walked away. Once Leo had left, Nico ate his burger in silence. He tried not to think about how this was the meal he'd had his first night at the infirmary, but he could hear Will's words echoing in his head. Eat up, death boy, Will had said this sternly. Nico felt tears sliding down his face as he ate the burger. He'd do anything to hear that voice again. He finished, then saw what Leo had left, a Kit Kat, just like Will had always had on his person, just for Nico. He saw that and started sobbing. There was a knock on Nico's door. Don't come in, he called, his voice still broken, his tone still flat. I came to apologize, came the soft voice of the Hecate girl Liz. I don't want to hear it. I don't care if you're sorry, if it was some kind of accident. I don't care, all right? You can't come and apologize as if you stole some chocolate cake. That was my boyfriend, the love of my life, and worst of all, you weren't even mature enough to see that if it weren't for him, your brother would have died a lot earlier. Not only that, he did his best. You weren't there to comfort him as he started to panic. You couldn't forgive Will for not saving your brother after he did his best. I'm allowed to not forgive you for being a revenge-driven girl who killed my boyfriend because he tried to do his best to fix the unfixable. Sorry for your loss, but I don't want your apologies or condolences. You killed him. I was 10 when my sister died, and I had better control of my powers than you. Now go. Nico was shaking with anger. Leave. The sound of receding footsteps was heard, and Nico started to sob. He took a bite of the Kit Kat Leo had given him and just broke down, tears staining his pillow again. Well, he whispered in a broken tone. Why? He lay back against the headboard that Will had held him against so many times before, sniffling. He needed Will. It had been 2 weeks since the whole incident with Will's death. The Hecate girl had felt terrible for what she'd done, and nobody forgave her for it. However, ultimately, Chiron had to acknowledge that she'd lost control of her powers, so she was allowed to stay. Nico had barely spoken to anyone for the 2 weeks, not even leaving his cabin, and Leo had been trying to help him. The son of Hephaestus could be surprisingly gentle. Nico still hasn't spoken much, though, and there was an air of solemnity over the camp. Kayla and Austin were left to run the infirmary, but they couldn't help but look at the spot on the floor, no longer stained with blood seeping from Will's body. Dionysus was in a particularly terrible mood, snappy with the campers. He's tried multiple times to get some wine, repeatedly failing. Raina, Hazel, and Frank had come to visit to pay their respects, and even Hazel couldn't get Nico to talk. Raina seemed pissed at nobody in particular. Hazel seemed sad, and Frank was comforting Hazel. Rachel had come as well, and she hadn't said a word the whole time. She couldn't stop glancing at the Hades cabin. Today was the ceremony for Will, and the camp had decided to do a regular funeral. They had called Will's mom, Naomi, and she had been let into the camp so that she could attend the ceremony. Nico had finally left his cabin. "Nico," Kayla said when she saw him. Her face was solemn, her eyes puffy. You came out." Nico was too sad to even joke about her choice of words. There were dark circles under his eyes, and I need to honor him. He deserves the best even now. His voice shook, and it was soft. This was the first time he'd spoken in weeks, other than his sobbing and screaming. He was the best thing to happen to me. He deserves the best. Kayla nodded solemnly. The Apollo kids and Nico working together to set up for the funeral. There were chairs set up, the coffin ready to be put into the ground. Naomi saw the table set up and the coffin, and she had to leave to the bathroom, tears streaming down her face as she looked at the ceremony for her son. Will was, as always, dressed in a flannel and shorts, for Nico wouldn't have it any other way. Nico looked down at Will's body, his chest wound covered by his shirt, his eyes closed. If Nico hadn't known better, he would think Will was peacefully asleep, like he was those nights that sometimes Nico would hold him. Tears stung Nico's eyes as he stared down at his late fiancé, his heart heavy in his chest. Once everyone was there, people came to the funeral, since it was Camp Half-Blood. Dionysus was able to convince Zeus to make it rain at camp. The first to give a speech was Naomi, who had come back. She swallowed, tears clearly about to stream down her cheeks. Will, he was the sweetest boy. He could light up any room. She smiled tearily, literally and figuratively. He had the most beautiful voice, but he chose to help people because that's the kind of sweet boy he was. I wasn't always home, sometimes for the holidays, so he would stay at camp. I was on tour. Her voice broke. I just wish I'd canceled it or something. Just a moment. I'd give anything for just a moment. She was overcome with tears and was unable to keep speaking. Kayla was next. Tears were streaming down her face as she stepped up to the podium. He was the best. I don't even know what to... Her voice broke. I'm sorry, I can't do this. She stepped down and Austin hugged her as she cried. Austin didn't give a speech because he wanted to comfort Kayla, so Nico was next. Then Apollo appeared. He looked a mess. I'm sorry I late. How do I cope with this? I knew I would witness all my children die, but not this soon, gods. A tear rolled down his face and he stepped down from the podium. Nico stepped up to the podium, clearly on the verge of tears. Well, he was my nightlight care bearer, and I was his. I still am. He was the best thing that happened in my screwed up life. I don't know what to do now. He was so radiant, he was so stubborn, he was so kind. His voice broke, and his eyes settled on the Hecate kid in the crowd. She was crying, her face guilty. Nico's voice shook as he spoke again. And I forgive you. But because you lost control, and Will would want me to, I forgive you. There was still a trace of anger in his eyes as all the campers looked somewhat shocked. Not for you. For Will. Because Will deserves everything, and I love him. I don't know who I am without him. Tears were flowing freely down his face. He fiddled with his engagement ring. There's so much I could say about him. He was there from day one, a constant. I could always rely on him. There's too much to say. He wiped his tears. He looked down at Will's body. I love you, Will, always and forever, the sun to my star. As Nico looked down at Will's body, tears running down his face, something strange occurred. As he looked down at him, Will's eyes suddenly and slowly fluttered open. Nico was startled, then started stuttering something incoherent, but it resembled Will's name. The tears that ran down his face weren't sad, they were relieved and surprised, and his face broke into a tentative smile. Will smiled tearily, sitting up. He looked at Nico lovingly, happy to see him again. Hey, fiancé, he whispered. Nico started sobbing as he hugged Will, practically tackling him into the coffin, not caring about anything. Not caring about the fact that his fiancé was lying in a coffin. Nico didn't care that his tears were soaking Will's shirt, or that Will's tears were soaking his. I swear to the god, Solus, don't scare me like that again, sobbed Nico. It's okay, my grumpy ball of darkness. I'm here, Will said, holding him tight. Don't call me that, Nico sobbed, tears still streaming down his face. He didn't really care about anything, though. For his sunshine was back. Kaylin, Austin, Apollo, and Naomi all took turns hugging him, nobody questioning it. Nobody dared to. The scene was a blur. Nobody remembered exactly what was going on, through the tears and havoc. Not many words were said. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody could speak. I don't think anyone's ever seen such a face of relief as the Hecate kid, who, as Nico predicted, Will forgave. Finally, after a long while, Nico opened Will's closed fist, which nobody had noticed. Inside was a note. Nico, I think you lost this. Love, Dad. Nico sobbed, silently thanking his father. He was going to burn a lot more food tonight, and hugged Will again. As he did, he whispered in his ear, I love you, tesoro. Will grabbed his hand tighter than ever before, his cold ring squeezing against his skin. And that was Sunset. Okay, so if it sounded like there were some parts where I was like legitimately crying, it's because I kind of was. Specifically the funeral part. Like, funeral scenes get me, man. I'm pretty sure they're like the only things I've ever cried at. There was a funeral scene in a fic. It was like after the Battle of Manhattan, and that was another one of the only fics I ever had to pause for a minute just to catch my breath. And then this one, funeral scenes get me, man. And it does have a happy ending. I actually do like, we don't talk about the timeline. Riordan's timeline is kind of fucked up too. Anyway, so, oh, also I started working on a cosplay. So I'm gonna be attempting to cosplay Thanatos from the Hades video game. If you don't know what he looks like, look it up. He's awesome. He's like my favorite character. I love him. So, and I know he doesn't technically, I don't think we ever see him wearing one, but I started making like a laurel wreath, like a headpiece. Um, and I'm gonna paint it yellow and purple. Because like I know he doesn't technically wear one, but I am going to be putting one underneath his hood because I want to. And in the end, it's my own creative project, so it's fine. Anyway, I hope you all have a good night or day wherever you are. Sorry for this more depressing fic. Next week's wait, what? What is next? Oh, um, okay. So next week will be another chapter of All We Have for Feathers. Remember, we are getting into the Vengeance Saga. If you've listened to Epic, you know what that means. Like, I just did the first two chapters of the Vengeance Saga last week, so yeah, we're getting there. Okay. Anyway, hope y'all have a good night or day wherever you are. Again, sorry for this more depressing fic. But I do love this fic. It's short and it's nice, and I love Soul Angelo stuff, so I love it. Okay. I believe I will be starting. I finished The Coral Palace. I finished reading it. I'm sorry to the person who made that comment that it took me so long, but I did it. I finished it. I'm gonna start it 2 weeks from now. The chapters are a bit. The chapters are a bit longer, so they will probably be coming out earlier in the day because I will do them earlier in the day, and I just kind of post whenever I make the videos. So hope y'all are looking forward to that. There is a lot of like actual like Greek characters and stuff in there that I don't know how to pronounce. So a lot of it I will be pronouncing based on what English characters it looks like. I know I will be butchering it so hard. I don't speak Greek in any capacity, so I have no idea how to pronounce any of that stuff. And I'm sorry in advance for my butchering of all of those characters. Anyway, bye!